Welcome back to New York Women in Communications, Tips from the Top series. I'm here today with Joanne Lipman. She is one of the nation's most prominent journalists and commentator. She was the founder of Conde Nast Portfolio magazine and deputy managing editor at the Wall Street Journal. Thank you so much for joining us, Joanne.
Thank you so much for having me.
Your new book, Strings Attached, talks a lot about mentoring. How important was mentoring for your career trajectory?
Mentoring is so important for all of us, to have mentors, then to become mentors. And I'll tell you about what Strings Attached grew out of, actually, was a very similar story about mentoring. It grew out of an op-ed that I wrote for the New York Times a couple of years ago that was about the death of my childhood music teacher. This is the man who made all the difference in my life, who changed my life. And that even though I had stopped playing the instrument he taught me, I used the lessons that I learned in his classroom every single day in terms of things like perseverance and motivation and self-confidence. And that was the genesis of Strings Attached, which grew into a book about this man and the impact that one person can have on so many lives.
Now I feel like I should reach out to my music teacher back in the day. Let's talk about your career, because you've held some incredible positions. How can women push themselves to achieve those high-level positions?
What really, really surprised me was the difference I saw in the way men and women in the workplace handle themselves. And one of the things that was fascinating that I really hadn't realized before was I noticed that men would come into my office constantly to ask for a raise, to ask for a promotion, very aggressively asking on behalf of themselves. And when they did, get the raise or the promotion, then immediately asking for more, like, I want a bigger office. Women, on the other hand, very rarely asked. Almost no women would ever come in asking for a raise or a promotion. And when you give a woman a raise or a promotion, very often her answer is like, oh my God, thank you so much. I feel so lucky. She's not lucky. She's damn good. She deserves it. And so I think that there's something in terms of women just being aware of that dynamic and being aware that it's okay to take ownership of what you achieve.
Do you think the workplace culture has changed and now more women will do that?
If you're talking, let's say, in a news meeting, which I've been in many, in a news meeting very often, the men will like bang the table and say, we must cover such and such a story, like we must cover this story. And women will sort of raise their hand and say, wouldn't it be a good idea if we covered? And it's like a question. They're both saying exactly the same thing, which is we better cover whatever this issue is. But it comes out differently, and the women are sometimes discounted because they're raising it as a question and seen as weaker. And so it is something, it's a dynamic that I think the more that women are aware of it, the better off we will all be. And it's something, I find it even in myself. I have to be always very self-aware in situations like that.
Did you find challenges being a woman in a leadership position?
A lot of the challenges are the same that men face, so.
Good to hear.
I think we're all in the same boat. You want to do your best job. You want to make sure that your supervisors and others are aware of the work that you are doing. I think that there is sometimes a higher hurdle for women just in terms of being heard and being seen as confident and assertive and not shrinking back. There's a tendency, I think, sometimes for women, more so than for men, to sort of internalize a rejection, whether it's an idea that gets shot down at a meeting or whether it's a story, if you're a journalist, that is, a story proposal that is rejected. And women sort of tend more so than men to take that personally as a personal rejection. Men, I think, are a little bit more likely to say, well, I had a good idea, they just didn't realize it.
What is the best piece of advice that you would give to a woman going into a career in communications?
Ignore the naysayers, ignore the haters. Like, you have a goal, go for it.
I guess we need to put those horse blinders on when we go into the workplace. Thank you so much for joining us, Joanne. You can catch more of New York Women in Communications Tips from the Top series on our website.